Hello everybody, it's Nick here with Nick Tolman Music, and today we are going to continue our beginner guitar lesson series using Hal Leonard's guitar method, Book 1. Let's get started. Alright, so today we're going to go ahead and take a look at page 18. And in our last lesson, we introduced chords for the first time, which is really exciting. We're going to take it a step further in our lesson today. But before we do, just a quick reminder, if you haven't already, please check out my Patreon page. Patreon is a great way to support Nick Tolman Music and say thank you for the content that you've received here on YouTube, and also help us to continue to bring this content to you. So consider becoming a patron today. All right, so today on page 18, we're going to learn 2 new chords, and we're going to go ahead and try to apply those to the exercises that are here on the page. So today the chords that we are going to learn are G and D7. So as we dive into these chords, there's a couple things that we need to just kind of make clear and understand. First off, when you look at the top of the page, it says the G chord, and it gives a fingering, and then it says the G chord alternate fingering, okay? So right out of the gate, and just a disclaimer that I'll put out there, I have used a lot of different guitar methods over the years, and I've taught students from a lot of different guitar methods, and none of them are perfect. There are a lot of great ones. I love the Hal Leonard method, but this is one part of the book that I really have a problem with, and that is the way that it introduces the G chord here. So for all those who are watching, if you're watching this and you take away one thing from this whole series, it's that's backwards. So the one that it says is the alternate fingering, you need to be using that fingering 90% of the time on the G chord. The one that it kind of presents as the main fingering is more of an alternate fingering, and actually will probably rarely be used, okay? Now, I'll explain to you why, and it's really simple. And the reason they do it this way is because the fingering that they show you to the far left is actually, for most people, is an easier fingering starting out to just do. They can get their fingers there, it tends to work, and so they put that there. The problem is that fingering presents a lot of challenges when moving to other chords, especially the C chord, okay? Now, if you notice, if I use that fingering and I move to a C chord, it is a huge adjustment. Every single finger changes and they go in different directions. Certainly it can be done, but it's by far not the most efficient way. Now, if you look at what it's calling the alternate fingering, and watch the difference when I move from that chord to a C. It's a much more natural movement. All right, so for the remainder of this time in this series, I'm going to be using the fingering, the G chord fingering that it shows in the middle of the page, what it calls the alternate fingering, and I encourage you to do the same. It may be a little bit more work right up front to get this fingering to speak well, but it's going to be worth it, okay? Now, the other thing that you'll find is that you've already learned the G7, and so to go to G with this fingering that I'm proposing is just a single finger change. It's a very easy change. It doesn't make sense to take your fingering that you've learned for G7 and then all of a sudden do this to play G. Doesn't make sense. All right, so go ahead and use the alternate fingering. Okay, so let's take a look at this a little bit. So we're looking at the alternate fingering, what it calls the alternate fingering of the G chord. And what's going to happen is your third finger, or your ring finger, is going to be placed on the 3rd fret of the low E string. Your second finger will be placed on the 2nd fret of the 5th string, or the A string. And then your pinky, or your fourth finger, will be placed on the 3rd fret of the high E string. Okay? You're going to strum all the strings. All right? Now you'll look at the diagram, it outlines that for you. You can see the photo of the hand, and that should kind of get you going. Again, just like the chords before, if you're experiencing any dead sounds, readjust. Make sure that you're way up on your fingertips. Make sure that you're getting around so your fingers are curved, coming down at the strings, rather than coming at them at a more flat approach across the fretboard. All right, so up on your fingertips, you're checking each note, making sure that everything is ringing, and then strum, right? If you're checking those notes and you realize, oh, I've got dead strings, try to isolate those problems, see which fingers are touching strings that they shouldn't be touching, and go from there, all right? All right, so let's take a look at this D7 chord, all right? The D7 chord, you're gonna have your 2nd finger placed on the 2nd fret of the 3rd string on the G string there. That note is A. You're gonna have your 1st finger on the 1st fret of the 2nd string. That note would be C. And then you're gonna have your 3rd finger on the 2nd fret of the 1st string. All right, and then you're gonna strum the top 4 strings. Open D, A, C, and that top note is F sharp. But you don't need to worry too much about the names of each note. You're just gonna strum the top 4 strings. You're gonna avoid strumming the 5th string or the 6th string, because those notes are not necessarily part of this chord, all right? All right, so that's your D7 chord. Now, just like before, whenever you learn new chords, it's important to spend some time practicing moving between those chords. Now, from G to D7 is a relatively big move. All your fingers are going to change. However, for me, I'm focusing on this 1st finger right here. So if I'm playing the G chord, that 1st finger I know is going to be going to that 1st fret on the 2nd string. I'm kind of aiming for that and using that as my guide as I make the move with the rest of my fingers. And you might spend a good 30 minutes or more just in your practice session, just sitting and practicing that move. Again, when we're practicing new chords, it's all about envisioning the move and then making the move quickly. Take your time, think about it, envision it, and then do it. Rather than trying to do one finger at a time and making big gaps in the sound. All right, we want to try to keep the sound as connected as possible. Okay. Now, the other thing that you need to start thinking about is the fact that we know 2 other chords as well, right? We know C and we know G7. All right. So now we want to start incorporating the ability to move between those chords as well. So let's talk about C for a second. The move from C to G should feel very similar to the move from C to G7, right? It's a very similar move. In fact, your hand is basically in the same position. It's just a matter of dropping that 4th finger and moving your 2nd and 3rd finger down 1 string to make that move, all right? So spend some time working on that, C to G. But then you also would want to practice C to D7, right? C, D7. Now this is important because it brings up a concept that is going to be really helpful for you down the road when you learn chords. And that is that sometimes when you move to a new chord, you're going to have fingers that don't need to move, and it's important to know what those are and to use those as a guide. So when you move from C to D7, one of the fingers doesn't move. Do you know which one it is? You got it. It's your first finger, right? So your first finger on the C chord and your first finger on the D7 chord are in the same place. Use that to your advantage, and don't forget that, because when you make that move, it's going to really help you. I call those anchor fingers, right? You use that first finger as an anchor to guide you when you move to that next chord, all right? So spend some time working on that change as well, C to D7. And then we've got G7, all right? So we've already learned G7. The move from G to, or from G7 to G should be very simple. It's gonna be more common in a chord progression to move from G to G7. Either way, practice going back and forth between those two chords, right? And also the move from maybe G7 to D7, right? All the fingers move, but again, I'm using that first finger as kind of my guide because it moves the least, right? It's just gonna move up one fret or one string. Start experimenting with different combinations of these chord movements and incorporate that into your practice, especially starting out. Eventually they're gonna become way more natural and you won't have to spend so much time just, slowly practicing chord changes. But for now, it's gonna be important that you put that time in. All right, so let's go ahead and take a look at exercise 35. Now again, this is slash notation. All we're doing is practicing playing the chords and changing between them. All right, so I'm gonna set my metronome to 72 and we're gonna go ahead and try this. So I'm gonna try 35 and I'm gonna loop it a couple times. I'm gonna start by just doing whole notes, then I'm gonna do half notes, and then I'm gonna do quarter notes. All right, here we go. Here's 72 on the metronome. Again, starting with whole notes. 1, 2, ready and go. 2, 3, 4. 2, 3, 4. 2, 3, 4. 2, 3, 4. 2, 3, 4. 2, 3, 4. 2, 3, 4. 2, 3, 4. And there it is. Especially when I'm doing the whole notes, I'm really focusing on making sure that the movements are just right and making sure that I'm strumming all the strings correctly. This is especially important with that D7 and making sure that we're aiming and only strumming those top 4 strings. All right, so take advantage of the time that you're going slow to really do things right, okay? All right, let's go and try it with half notes. 1, 2, half notes, and... All right, and let's go ahead and try quarter notes. Here we go. 1, 2, quarter notes, and... All right, if that tempo is too fast for you starting out, please do not hesitate to go slower. Especially when you get to the quarter notes like that, you might find that it's a struggle when you actually have to make the change. And you might be getting gaps, right? You might go... We want to eliminate that. So if you're catching yourself do that, turn the metronome down and go slower. Go slow as you need to be able to get that change without a gap, and then slowly build that metronome up. All right, let's go and try 35 at 120 on the metronome. Again, here is whole notes. Here we go. 1, 2, 1, 2, ready, and 1, 2, 3, 4, 3, 4, 3, 4. Let's go and try half notes. 1, 2, half notes, go. And lastly, let's do quarter notes. 1, 2, ready, and go. And there we go. All right, so let's go ahead and take a look at 36. This is going to also incorporate the C chord, so which we learned in our last lesson, but it's going to be important to be able to incorporate that in the context of these two new chords that we've just learned. All right, so let's go and try 36. Same process. We're going to start at 72, do whole notes, half notes, quarter notes, and then take the metronome up. So here's 72 on the metronome. Here we go. 1, 2, 36, go. 2, 3, 4, 2, 3, 4, 2, 3, 4, 2, 3, 4, off. Let's try half notes. Here we go. 1, 2, half notes, go. All right, let's go and try quarter notes. 1, 2, quarter notes, go. Nice. All right, so again, just focusing especially on that movement from C to D7, remembering that you have an anchor finger, right? So that first finger should not move when you change those chords. If you catch yourself taking all your fingers off and then trying to reset, that's the wrong answer, right? You want to start and only move the fingers that you need to move, okay? The move from G to C, also, you should notice that it is a should look like a very small movement. All the fingers are moving, but they're roughly in the same shape. So you just need to make sure that you're putting those fingers in the right place, all right? Cool, let's go ahead and take that tempo up to 120. Here we go, same process. 1, 2, 1, 2, ready, and 2, 3, 4. And half notes. 1, 2, ready, go. And lastly, quarter notes. 1, 2, ready, and go. Again, the metronome markings that I'm giving you here are just examples of a slow tempo and a faster tempo. If you need to start slower, please do. And by all means, take the metronome faster. It's only going to help you out in the long run to be able to do these things at a quicker tempo as well. All right, lastly, let's take a look at number 37, Pay Me My Money Down. This is the only new song that we're learning in this lesson. But I'll go ahead and start at 72 and we'll play the melody for you. 1, 2, ready, and go. All right, so you'll notice that actually it's been, in our last lesson, we didn't do much melody stuff, and the first part of this lesson we haven't, so if you need to review some of the notes, please look back at previous lessons and review some of the notes that we've learned. But this one shouldn't prove to be too challenging, right? It's pretty straightforward. You're utilizing notes across the top 3 strings. It doesn't go down onto the 4th string. So it's kind of a jump back to some earlier lessons of when we were just using notes on the first 3 strings. But it also does have words and chords that it wants you to learn, okay? So there's like all the different facets to it. Now, obviously, if you are a guitar player that has no interest in singing, feel free to skip over the words part of it. But if you do want to know how to sing and play, then this is a good one to practice, all right? So the next step that I would practice at this point, if you have kind of mastered the melody playing, is to start singing while you play that melody, right? It's early, so I'm going to sing it down an octave. Normally that's fine in my range, but it's early and I've got a bit of a cough, so we're going to sing it down an octave. But here we go. Pay me, oh pay me my money down. Pay me or go to jail. Pay me my money down. Nice. I love the early mornings when I can hit the low notes. But yeah, so that's the idea. You want to practice being able to play that melody and sing it along, okay? The next step would be to practice the chords, all right? So in this case, I'm gonna suggest that your goal is to be able to just do quarter notes, all right? So I'm gonna show you what that is at 72, and I'm gonna go ahead and add the melody to it so you can practice playing the melodies and or the chords along with it, as well as singing, all right? So here are the chords and melody together. 1, 2, ready, and go. All right, so if you are interested in singing and playing, the end goal is to be able to sing the melody and play the chords, right? So something like, pay me, oh pay me my money down. Pay me or go to jail. Pay me my money down. Right? That's the end goal. Again, the steps to that are: first, practice and learn the melody, playing. Second, practice singing while playing that melody to learn learn the vocal part of it, learn how to sing that melody, right? Third, practice the chords by themselves. And then lastly, practice singing that melody that you learned earlier while you play those chords, all right? So those are the steps to learning how to sing that melody while playing the chords, all right? I'm gonna show you this all at a faster tempo, and then we'll finish up for today. So here is 120 on the metronome, and here's the melody. Here we go. 1, 2, ready, and... All right, and singing. Pay me, oh and here's the chords. 1, 2, 1, 2, ready, and... And lastly, I'll show you what the melody sounds like with the chords singing. Here we go. Pay me, oh pay me my money down. Pay me or go to jail. Pay me my money down. And that's our lesson for today. Thank you so much for tuning in. As always, please subscribe, and we will catch you next time. Thanks.